Hello everyone and welcome back to their Teamfight Tactics Guide. Today we cover 9.2 the patch that was just released and go over the best comps to run in the new patch. Quickly before we get into it, I want to thank today's video sponsor UTFT.gg, made by the same makers of U.gg, the professional League of Legends website. UTFT.gg is a free tool you can use to track not only the stats within TFT, but also stats for your player as well as any other player on the leaderboards. In fact, it's very useful to head to the leaderboards, click on the top players, and see what comps they are currently using to win their games. I found a lot of value in looking through the individual champion stats too, because as we've talked about before, the champions that are linchpin units for specific builds are important to keep your eye on always. Because if you happen to get a very important crucial unit to 2 or 3 star really easily, you can easily shift your build over to use it properly. So head over to the website, type in your summoner name and check out your stats, or look at leaderboard and tier list to find some really useful information that might help you up your game as you're playing Teamfight Tactics. Now in this patch, we got a couple new characters. Senna, which is a 2-cost Shadow Soulbound unit. Her ability, Piercing Darkness, fires a beam through her furthest ally, dealing damage to enemies and buffing allies' auto attacks when it applies. She's actually a great target for Morellonomicon because she has a pretty wide area of effect. Lucian's 4-cost, Light and Soulbound, so if he works with Senna on that 2-class bonus, which is anytime a Soulbound unit dies, it will stay alive as long as there's another Soulbound champion on the board. So what we'll talk about in a moment is the combo between Senna and Lucian. Generally, you want Senna to be tanky and in the back of your team. You can let Lucian die and he'll basically be untargetable until Senna dies. So it's a pretty neat combo. And lastly, your 5-cost Amumu is an Inferno Warden, and he's a huge add to the game because the majority of the Inferno units in the game are pretty squishy. I mean, you've got Rangers and Summoners, they're all relatively squishy, but putting this Amumu on top of it gives you a great tanky option for Inferno, and his ultimate is actually pretty crazy. He explodes an AoE, dealing damage and stunning units in the area, and the area gets bigger as he levels up. And so it's actually a great initiation tool, a lot of really good CC, and if you're running high Inferno, he'll apply the debuff dot to everyone that gets hit by it. It's pretty strong. On top of that, we got some UI updates that are pretty sweet. If you hover over buy XP, you will see the amount of gold that it takes to get to your next level, which is a huge add. You also see the drop rates right above your bar, so you don't have to use any downloadable add-ons like Blitz or TF Tactics, which are still good to use, but you don't need them. And as far as the main things to focus on for balance in this patch, we're going to see a change to Inferno, which makes it so it triggers on spell damage and critical strikes, which is huge. You're also going to get a little bit more of a burn speed because it deals damage over 4 seconds instead of 5 seconds, and it actually lights more hexes on fire as well. So overall, Inferno got a nice little cleanup. The woodland units, Ivern, Maokai, and then the desert unit Renekton got some reduction as well, and this is mostly to counter the egg roll woodland rush strategy from 9.23. And the other change to be aware of is Phantom Dancer got a pretty huge nerf bat to the face. Previously, Phantom Dancer would make you take no damage if you got crit. However, now it will just only remove the bonus damage from that crit, but you'll still be hit by the original attack. This is a really big change from Phantom Dancer and makes it a lot less viable because you're still going to be taking damage from these big hits. And so you'll probably see Phantom Dancer start to work its way down into the meta, but we'll have to see what happens over the next. Now let's get into the top comps for 9.24. And I think the big question a lot of people are asking is, where can I fit in Amumu, Lucian, and Senna, the new units? So let's talk about those comps first, although these are not really in any particular order. The first comp I'd like to talk about is Light Soulbound, and this takes advantage of the Lucian plus the Senna. Remember that the 2 Soulbound bonus means that if you have 2 Soulbound units and one of them dies, it will be an untargetable unit until the second one dies. And so what you'll actually be able to do is put Lucian in the middle or front line is what I like doing, and then put Senna in the back with a little bit of a tanky item like a Guardian Angel or a Warmogs. And what will happen is Lucian will use his whole HP bar to tank some shots, become untargetable, and then start wreaking havoc on the enemy team while Senna is still alive. And this is great because he still gets benefits from items and he still scales really well as well. And so an easy comp you can use to work in the Lucian and the Senna is a light Soulbound comp with 6 light. Now in this comp, you run Lucian and Senna, obviously. Then you want to get to 6 light with either a conversion item or with just an extra light unit. So here's the default setup. Aatrox, Nasus, Vayne, Soraka, Lucian, and a Kindred with a light conversion item on her will give you your 6 light bonus. Since you are really close to getting Blademaster's finish off, you go ahead and put Master Yi in there, which is a huge pickup, which also gives you Mystic with the Soraka, which makes you a lot more tanky against some of these major mage combinations we're seeing a lot in the current meta. The Ranger bonus will help out the Vayne and the Kindred, and you know Kindred can deal a lot of damage in this setup. And you also end up with 3 Shadow because of the Senna Shadow bonus that makes it a lot easier to stack up. So Kindred plus Senna plus Master Yi gives you that Shadow bonus. For items, you're still looking to cap out the Lucian and the Vayne for major damage. The Vayne scales really well with a Death Edge and then attack speed items like a Rage Blade or a Rapid Fire Cannon. Rapid Fire Cannon is becoming one of the safest items to get for your carries because the board is so much bigger now that if you put a Rapid Fire Cannon on a ranged unit and situate it in the back of your team comp, you actually keep them pretty safe from major AoE attacks, especially AoE attacks coming from Berserker. You can also put a Morelnomicon pretty easily on Senna because the area of effect of her ability is really large. And then for items on Lucian, on-hit items like Swordbreaker, Hush, and Giant Slayer all work great for him because every time he uses his ability, he'll get a lot of extra on-hit attacks for his shots. Now, if you can't get the light lineup because some people are hyper rolling light and they're not available, you can actually run a Soulbound Shadow setup. And this one looks like this. Senna and Lucian again using, again, on-hit items and attack items. Then put Senna in the back with Morellos and a Guardian Angel or a Warmogs. And you want to finish off the Shadow with Malzahar and a Scion. This gives you the 3 Shadow bonus. But because you already have the Summoner with Malzahar, you go ahead and put in the Annie and the Yorick, giving you 3 Summoner. And since Lucian and Yorick gives you 2 light, you want to put a Soraka in the last slot, which gives you the 3 light bonus and will finish off Mystic with the Janna. So it's a very well-balanced build. You're gonna get a lot of damage coming out from the Lucian, and then a little bit of some from Malzahar, Annie, Scion, or Yorick. And actually Senna does pretty decent damage as well. You wanna get an Iceborne Gauntlet on one of your front lines, either Scion or Yorick. I personally like putting it on Yorick on the outside, but as soon as Scion can get his ult off, he can actually get a really nice chain of events, especially with the 3 light heal bonus coming. Now for number 3, I wanna talk about a way you can get a Mumu in your build, because of course he's a new unit. We want to get him in there. We want to try out the new build, and he's actually very strong. He's a great legendary unit to pick up. The build I'm going to talk about here is Inferno Summoner, and I've actually been running this a good bit. I think it's actually very powerful, and you'll be surprised with some of these matches where you'll see the fire start up with the Inferno bonus, and then it looks like you're losing, and a few seconds later with the dot ticking down everywhere, you start slaughtering teams. It's a really fun build to watch. This build consists of getting 6 Inferno units with Amumu, Annie, Varus, Kindred, Zyra, and Brand. Because 2 of the Inferno units are summoners with Zyra and Annie, you go ahead and put Malzahar in there, which will give you the 3rd summoner. And it's pretty sweet because with Kindred that gives you 2 Shadow, so you go ahead and put Scion in there to get the 3 Shadow bonus. You got a lot of raw damage coming out of this build. Now it's not as tanky as other builds, so you really need the Annie to get the bear off in order to get your front line bolstered. Scion and Amumu are tanky, but sometimes they'll get shredded by Desert Blademaster builds or some really scary Ranger builds if they're standing there too long. So you really need to make sure you position Annie in a way that she will get her ult off every single time, because sometimes if she dies before summoning the bear, you can end up losing the round. Item wise, you want to beef out the Brand and the Kindred for your damage output. This is going to give you a lot of really flexible damage, and we know that Kindred scales well. I have this listed as a Giant Slayer and a Rapid Fire Cannon for Kindred, but you can also put on things like an Infinity Edge to get extra damage on there as well. Any frontline unit in this meta is going to benefit from having a Dragon's Tooth and or an Iceborne Gauntlet. You probably want at least 1 Iceborne Gauntlet in every comp you run if you can swing it, just to get that extra slow in there, and it's still very good, especially since Phantom Dancer is not as good of an option anymore. You can put extra items on a Mumu like Thief's Gloves or just any tanky items like Blade Mail or a Warmogs to keep him alive, but he will deal a lot of damage and stun a lot of units in the process. Jeweled Gauntlet, Death Cap all work great on Brand, and then anything that makes the Malzahar cast more to keep his units up is great. I also don't have listed here on a Morelnomicon, so you'd probably want a Morelnomicon on either Brand or the Malzahar. You can even put it on a Moo if you want to get a little extra anti-healing into that build. Next up is Desert Blademaster. Now, a couple things happen with this patch. With Phantom Dancer getting a little bit weaker, especially since that's the only real counter against crits and high damage auto attackers. In this case, because you still get the hit through, Phantom Dancer is now weaker, so Assassins, Blademasters, and Rangers become a little bit more reliable. So in this build, we're going to take 4 Blademaster with Yasuo, Master Yi, Sivir, and then preferably a Blademaster, Blade of the Ruined King onto a Nocturne. If you ever heard anyone say the word blender, this is what they're talking about. It's basically a Blademaster Nocturne because when he gets extra attacks, he builds up his mana faster and then he spins a lot doing his move. So Nocturne is a huge pickup right now. There's a couple builds that work with him, but personally, I think Desert Blademaster works the best with Nocturne. You're going to want a Blade of the Ruined King to get that 4 Blademaster bonus. If you can't get one, you can swap out the Kiana in this build for an Aatrox, let's say, to get 4 Blademasters because it's very important. But since you have the Sivir, you have 1 out of 2 Desert, so you may as well put Kha'Zix in this build for just raw damage output, and because he'll give you the Desert bonus. You want to make Nocturne as tanky as possible, and so adding in a Rek'Sai here gives you the Steel bonus, so both of them will be a little bit harder to kill when that Steel immunity procs up. Now, because you have the Master Yi in there, you want to put 1 more Mystic, because Mystic buff is one of the best buffs you can get for almost all compositions. So putting a Janna in there behind the Master Yi will give you that Mystic bonus. And then lastly, you have a couple options, but I'm actually going to say go ahead and put in Kiana in this build. She's a great addition because she will give you the 3 out of 3 Assassin bonus for both Nocturne and Kha'Zix, which is huge. She does a decent amount of damage herself, but she also has a stun. And personally, I think she's one of the most underrated units in the game right now. I think her variable origin is something that people shy away from, but using her for the Assassin bonus alone is enough. And if you're also on a cloud map, the Kiana will give you the 3 out of 3 cloud bonus, which is really big pickup, gives you a little bit more dodge chance. Items wise, you want most of your items to stick to Sivir and Nocturne. If you have excess, you can put them onto Master Yi or Kha'Zix, so they'll both do a lot of damage and generally benefit from having items. But for Sivir, I like having a rapid fire cannon for any of my carries that are in the back line, Giant Slayer for more damage because she's going to bounce between targets doing on hit, and then a Hush or Sword Breaker for the on hit as well. You can even go Infinity Edge or Rage Blade, but personally I'd rather save those items for Nocturne. Speaking of Nocturne, Death Edge, Blade of the Ruined King, and then Infinity Edge to me are the #1 items to pick up. Because Nocturne's going to live so long, the Death Blade will give him a ton of attack damage. The Blade of the Ruined King plus the Infinity Edge means he hits really hard, and so he's going to probably be your #1 damage dealer in most of these cases. Now again, you can put extra items on Master Yi or Kha'Zix, but personally, I like getting the Kiana a Shojin's because you get a lot of extra stuns, and her stun baseline I think is 3 seconds, and so she gets a lot of really big CC once she jumps into the backline. Number 5, let's talk about Poison Predator. Poison Pred was actually a build that was very popular in 9.23, and I didn't cover it in my last video because it actually has a pretty big swing usually on getting the Kog'Maw stacked out, and sometimes can feel really weak if you don't hit crucial thresholds with those Predators. Now, though that is true, you get a lot of really good late game out of this, and I think the changes to the Phantom Dancer opens this build up even more because there's less threat of those attacks being dodged. Now, the Predator bonus is great because it executes very tanky targets at a certain health threshold, really all targets, but the tanky targets are the biggest value. And so in this case, you can run 3 Predators with Rek'Sai, Skarner, and Kog'Maw. And because you have Poison with Kog'Maw, you want to go ahead and add in Twitch and the Singed. Singed, by the way, is night and day difference when not having Morellonomicon and having a Morellonomicon. So if you feel like you're going towards Poison Pred, try to get that Morellonomicon in the backline because once you put it on Singed, he gets infinitely more effect. Now, because you have Twitch in the build, you have an extra slot for a Ranger, and so you want to put Ashe in here because that'll trigger with the Skarner to give you the 2 crystal bonus. Not to mention that Ashe is going to do a lot of damage here. Now, because you have Rek'Sai, you can throw Nocturne in there to get the extra Steel bonus, which makes both of them tankier, and you'll get extra damage out of the Nocturne even without items. And because you have the 2 crystal, you can go ahead and put in the Taric, which will give you a really big immunity, and it's just generally a really tough build to go against because you know that the 3 crystal units, Taric, Ashe, and Skarner, are really hard to kill because you can't hit them over a certain amount. On top of that, the 2 Steel units, Rek'Sai and Nocturne, get the damage immunity every time they hit a certain health threshold. And then on top of that, you can put Taric in there, which gives you even more damage immunity. And so it's a really tanky build that deals a lot of damage from the backline with Twitch, Ashe, and Kog'Maw. Morellonomicon on the Singed will just be spreading poison and burning people alive, and you get really good tankiness from the front line. So overall, a very good build. You want to look out for getting the Kog'Maw early, and then try to get that Singe with the Morellonomicon later on in the game. For items, Iceborne Gauntlet on the front line as always. You can put any tanky item on the Skarner if you want, because he's going to actually be a little bit tankier than Rek'Sai with the crystal bonus. Make sure you get a rapid fire cannon and a Luden's Echo on Kog'Maw, because he casts a lot of spells. The Luden's Echo is very effective. And then generally any attack item like Infinity Edge or Giant Slayer can work on him as well. Getting a Runaan's Hurricane on the Twitch is nice because it applies the on hit to everyone he touches, and you get that poison spread really quickly. And then of course, Morellonomicon on stage is gonna be the last item. And lastly, Ocean Mage or Mountain Mage. There's an Ocean build that uses mages, and I think this one has Mountain in it, and it's a lot more effective because of that, because the Mountain buff is really good. It's basically a reverse Phantom buff from set 1. So in this build, you're going to be getting 6 mages with a mage conversion item. Your 6 mages will be Vladimir, Talia, LeBlanc, Brand, and Syndra, which gives you 5 mages. Then get the mage cap for Malphite, because his damage on his ability is actually pretty dang high. Then you want to go ahead and finish off your Ocean with a Nami to get that extra little bit in there, and then you can go ahead and put in a Thresh, which will finish off your 4 Ocean and give you the double Warden buff with the Malphite. Items wise, Luden's Echo, Seraph's Embrace, and generally any cast items work great on Syndra. You can even put a Death Cap or a Jeweled Gauntlet on her as well. Your primary damage is going to be coming a lot from Brand if you have it set up right. So Morellonomicon, Death Cap, Rapid Fire Cannon if he's in the backline, which helps out a lot, is really great. And then of course, always put a Iceborne Gauntlet on any of your front line. Generally, you can also put a GA or a Dragon's Tooth or a Thornmail on Malphite to make him a lot tankier, because the longer he lives, the more often he's going to be using his ultimate, which means you get more CC and more damage is always good. If you can 3-star Vladimir or Talia, it's usually almost always worth it because they become a lot tankier and a lot more effective. Vladimir has his self-heal with his ability, then Talia has the CC, so the longer they live, the better, and they are become a pseudo frontline when you get them to 3-star. And that does it for today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And if you did like the video, do me a favor and hit the like button down below, because when you do that, you send special messages to the YouTube algorithm that helps this video get seen by more people, and I really appreciate it. If you like the content, be sure to hit subscribe and hit that notification bell icon, because without it, you actually won't be notified even though you're subscribed when I put out new videos. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and good luck out there when you're playing Teamfight Tactics.